Alright guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to wrap the rear quarter panel of your 2008 Subaru Outback in Avery gloss vinyl wrap. So you can see I've already got a piece cut out. I've already cleaned the surface of the car, and I've got my piece generally positioned where it needs to be. So on the left I have magnets to hold it up, and then on the right all I did was peel the backing paper from the vinyl wrap and then tacked it to the back there so it doesn't fall off. And then as you can see I'm just peeling the backing paper along the side there, and then what I'm going to do is tear it off and leave the backing paper on that little strip that hangs down and goes over the thin part of the wheel well there. What I'm doing now is I'm lifting it up and glassing out the vinyl, kind of getting it in place to set it up. As you can see, I forgot to tack it down well on the left side there, so it fell off. Plus I tacked it to matte vinyl wrap, which it doesn't stick to quite as well. I'm going to do the same on the right side, and what I'm doing is I'm basically conforming the vinyl to the body line and the shape of the body there. And so you can see that as I glassed it out left and right, it created horizontal and slightly angular wrinkles, but then as I pull it down slightly, it glasses out or smooths out nice and evenly. Now that I've got that down, I'm going to go ahead and lock in the vinyl by tacking down that body line there, the high point there. And now I'm going to work my way from the body line up to the window edge there, to the window edge trim, and then I'm going to tuck and feed in that vinyl to the edge of the window trim there, and make sure I feed that in and tuck it up tightly against the window edge trim in preparation for cutting it later on to trim off that excess vinyl. Basically what I'm going to be doing is creating a nice line that I'm going to be cutting from, where I can put the blade in between the body of the car and underneath the window trim rubber there. So once I've got that top part done, I'm just working my way down the side of the quarter panel there, making my way down. I have removed the body cladding around the fender piece all ahead of time while I cleaned it as well, and it's also on the bottom lower part where that kind of skinny looks like an elephant's trunk now comes off. But that's why you see me on the right where the bumper meets, that does protrude out, because that's supposed to meet where the body cladding normally fits. So you can see I basically laid the vinyl all the way down to the bottom of the bumper. I'm just coming back around to make sure everything's tucked in nice and tightly before I address that last strip down there. Now on that one I don't necessarily need to go all the way down, because the body cladding, when I reinstall it, will cover that entire part. Since I'm not going to be installing that body cladding for immediately following, I'm covering it up because there are a bunch of holes there that the pop clips go into. So what I'm doing now is making sure everything's tucked in nicely, as you can see, and then I'm going to go now address this this part that goes down the front side of the wheel well. Now this is a little bit weird because the body cladding is missing, so it goes in. You can see I'm tucking the vinyl in as it conforms inwards towards the underneath kind of the door. Again, the body cladding would be there, so I wouldn't necessarily need to even go down this far. It's binding up on the door because there's a big gap there, and so I just created a relief cut so that the vinyl will not bind on the door, and I can continue down and continue to work the vinyl down that strip there. Again, I'm only covering it simply because I'm not putting the cladding on. If you had the cladding on there already, you don't have to necessarily do that unless you're going to try to color match the body cladding that goes back on there again. Continuing to make my way down, as you can see, and I'm just getting any air bubbles that are forming up in the little recesses where the pop clips go into. Just using my finger in there, then my squeegee to get the flats, working it down, and I'm just going to trim off the bottom once I reach where that part meets the lower rocker panel there. So you can see that I'm just working it down, making sure I'm getting any air bubbles, working it down, getting any air bubbles, making sure everything's nice and tucked tightly. And there we go. Now I'm going back up, just making sure my gap between the door and the fender is nice and tight in preparation for trimming. What I'm doing here is putting in a fresh blade into my utility knife. Make sure that before you cut and trim anything that you have a very, very sharp utility knife ready to go. If you don't, load up a new blade. These are snap-off types. The blade brand is, I believe, Olfa, and the body of the knife is Vivid. So there I just basically used the back end of the passenger door as my guide. I put the side of my blade, the flat side of my blade on there, and use that as a guide. And then, like I said before, I created that cut line or that tuck line against the body and the window edge trimming. to give me a nice clean line, and I can float the tip of the blade just under the rubber seal, but just above the paint, cutting into the empty area between the two. That way I'm not cutting the rubber or the paint of the car. Now, kind of the same concept here. I'm putting the side of my blade against the headlight, or excuse me, the tail light side of there. That gives me just a little bit of excess that will tuck into the little gap of the body that will then fill in and around the remaining of the tail light or fender part of that area there. Down to the corner, and I'm just cutting in between the bumper and the fender now, and so I'm actually cutting on using the bumper side as my guide to create that straight line, which will then leave a small flap of vinyl that I can then tuck under into the fender area, filling in that gap as well. Now I'm going back and just taking my squeegee and tucking everything in. Make sure it looks nice and tight, make sure it looks clean, good to go. Going there on the head, on the tail light. Make sure everything's tucked in, using my micro squeegee to get those smaller, tighter areas if I need to, in the curvatures if I need to, before moving on to the next step. Alright, so now I'm opening the door so I can finish off. Now that I've cut out the door, I can open it now. I don't have that vinyl holding up, so I can cut off the excess vinyl that's going to be wrapping onto the inside of the door jamb there. And so there's a little corner right there that I'm just molding the vinyl around that corner there, and then I'm going to start to mold the vinyl along the part where I cut where the door meets and the back fender meet. So I'm just basically rolling over that flap of excess vinyl onto the inside part of the fender there, the front inside part of the fender, and then working my way up and down that area to make a nice clean seal, and that way it looks nice and clean when the door is closed. Now addressing the bottom part, all I'm doing is laying it just over the edge of the flat part where of the that part of the fender that leads into the door jamb, and then I'm working my way down to the bottom. I'm just setting it up so I can just trim off the bottom nice and cleanly. And then I'll I'll trim off the part of the vinyl that was on the top front side of the fender piece there, which is what I'm about to do. And so I'm just taking my knife and just with the weight of the knife, scoring the vinyl right on top of the paint. And if you're very careful, just using the weight of the knife and not pushing down on it, you won't cut the paint. You can see that because I was cutting so lightly, I actually had to go back on the bottom part to cut that. Now that part is done, made sure it was all sealed, and now I'm basically rolling the vinyl underneath the inside part of the fender. Make sure that this part is cleaned very well. I cleaned it about 2 or 3 times because of all the dirt and debris that gets caught under there. If there's any of that dirt, debris, oil, tar, or whatever, and you push out a vinyl over it, the vinyl will eventually fail. Once I've got it wrapped, I'm just going to use the back inside of the fender as my cut guide, which you see me doing there, to trim off that excess vinyl. And I'm just going to follow that all the way down, even though you can't see it at the moment because my big head is blocking the view right now. So basically the flat side of my blade is against the inside edge of the fender, and this giving me a nice guideline, if you will, to cut the vinyl that's on the inside of that fender. So basically all I'm doing there is following all down, trimming it off, and for all intents and purposes, this fender has been wrapped. What I'm doing now is going back and making sure everything looks good and looks clean, all the edges are sealed, press down, and voila. Alright, and so now you can see I'm bringing the camera in for a little close-up. Why I left tucked in that line, so it's a nice clean line there against the edge. That flap that was left over on the front just rolled across the front there, trimmed down at the bottom, underneath the fender wells there. Make sure that everything is clean and tucked. This now looks like it's been repainted with the high quality of this particular vinyl film, which is Avery SW900 series. Again, the color of this is gloss bright blue metallic. Hopefully you found this video to be instructive and informative. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and hit that like button. Thanks guys.